Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're here today with Reverend Kyle Norman, author of a new book titled Alive, Loved, and Free, Finding Jesus When Faith is Hard, which tackles the tricky issue of feeling discouraged in our faith. Kyle's a priest, an author, and a speaker. He holds a bachelor's degree in philosophy, a master's degree in divinity, and a doctorate in spiritual formation. He lives in beautiful Kamloops, British Columbia, with his wife and son. He's the rector of St. Paul's Cathedral and dean of the territory of the people. In the past 2 years, Kyle had over 200 blogs, articles, and devotions published in publications such as Ministry Matters, companioningcenter.org, crosswalk.com, renovarecanada.ca, christianity.com, and at Faith Today magazine. Kyle's been a featured speaker at many different events and has interviewed many people about their faith, including our friend Shane Claiborne.
Yeah,
When away from church, he enjoys family time, reading books on spiritual formation, and living dangerously by doing crossword puzzles in pen. There you
there
go.
you go.
You can learn more at revkylenorman.ca. So Kyle, it's wonderful to see you again, and many congratulations on your new book.
Thank you, Brian. It's lovely to see you as well. We were just saying that it all started with interacting with you at Writing for Your Life and the business of being a spiritual writer. So it's lovely to connect again.
Yes, absolutely. I was so excited when I saw the fruit of your efforts,
Yeah, thank you.
to
Yeah.
be. So that was just wonderful. So is there anything else that you want people to know about you besides what I kind of briefly touched on there?
No, you kind of nailed it. Fun fact, I was an active children's magician for 3 years. So I've had many different kind of interests and hobbies, but always loved to write and always wanted to be someone who put out a book. And so this is really kind of the culmination of a long held dream that I've had.
Good, good. Well, before we get into your book, can you tell us a little bit about your other work?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm the rector of St. Paul's Cathedral in Kamloops, and I'm also so I have two hats. I'm also what's known as the Dean of the Territory of the People, and the Territory of the People is the name of our diocese, and so me being dean means that I have an area role. So I help out our bishop, um, kind of minister and help out our 14 parishes and 31 different congregations in our area, in our
Mm.
diocese. So I'm often running in various different directions.
And what about speaking? What are some of the places that you've done speaking engagements
Yeah,
at?
so right now the dean stuff takes up a lot of my time, and so, but I am this summer in Sorrento Center, which is a retreat center in the Shuswap, which is about an hour east of us. I'm running a course on the spirituality of Henry Nouwen. So I'll be
Mm.
up there in August, running a kind of a 6-day course up there. So I'm really excited about that. That'll be fun.
Well, I've used, some of his books in Find Your Next Calling,
Yeah,
and excerpts to put on the blog, and he's really quite kind of a mentor, posthumously
yeah,
in that way.
exactly. And in an Alive, Loved, and Free, he shows up quite often just
Good,
because
good.
he has a great way of just cutting through the noise and explaining things in a very succinct and powerful way. So I've leaned on him quite often in the book.
Mm, good. So let's get to the book. As I said, the
Yeah,
title is
yeah.
I've Loved and Free, Finding Jesus When Faith is Hard. So can you tell everyone how that book came about?
Yeah, so the book is really a result of one of the most difficult spiritual moments in my life and in my wife's life as well. In 2015, she was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer, which was very unexpected for us. She had a tumor that was removed. We had thought that was the end of it, and apparently it wasn't. And so it was Maundy, Thursday,
Mm.
just before Good Friday and Easter, that we were hauled into the cancer center, and we were told, you need chemotherapy. You start next week. Here's the paperwork.
Wow. Wow.
And yeah, and so And I'm very clear in the book that this is my story as caregiver. This isn't her story. Like she can tell her story. But what I found as the caregiver and as an active priest is that I was thrown into kind of spiritual turmoil
Mm,
that I was very unprepared for.
mm,
Even in 22 years of ministry, I was kind of dumbfounded and shocked by what I ended up kind of walking through. But in the midst of it, like the tagline is finding Jesus when faith is hard, through the midst of going through that profound time of discouragement, renewed and re-engaged my faith in an unexpected, but in a powerful way, which has uh, which has really kind of really helped my ministry and made me go forward. So that book is, although it talks about a hard time in our lives, is ultimately a book about hope. It's a book about God's presence, and it's a book of encouragement.
mm. So first of all, how's your wife doing now?
He's doing well. So, like it was a hard road, which, she had chemotherapy for about 6 months, but then obviously the lingering stuff afterwards. But she's been 10 years cancer free. And if people have gone through cancer journeys, they know that that's a really important marker, right? That 10 years without any sort of resurgence of cancer. So she's doing well. She has a new thriving counseling career, and so we've kind of really entered into a really positive and beneficial place in our lives.
Hmm. Good,
Yeah.
good, good. Well, it's interesting, you as you said, at that point you've been a pastor for 22 years, and you've obviously cared for a lot of people that have gone through similar situations, but it's a lot different when it hits that close to home, isn't
Absolutely. Yeah, it
it?
is, right? I, you know, I grew comfortable, making my, somber reflections from the ease of my pulpit and my prayer bench, right? And but yeah, it hits hard when it's you, right? And so one of the things that I was unprepared for was really this feeling of kind of spiritual hollowness, preaching messages that I had a hard time
Mm,
living into. Um, I've long had a habit of morning prayer, so beginning the day with a certain liturgy I'm an Anglican, so in our context. Uh, but I found that I couldn't, right? Like that's my prayer chair, which I had, and I would sit there and I wouldn't be able to say anything,
mm,
right? So prayer just dried up.
mm,
I've always loved the church, but there was this sense of almost vacancy with the church. And I had questions like, why did this happen? Was God angry at us? You know, maybe if I was a better priest, maybe if I was a better husband, this wouldn't have happened. Like all this stuff started happening within me, which which I had to really work, which took me by surprise, and then I had to really try to work through.
mm, mm. Wow. Well, your book asks a great question. Could it be that in the places where we are discouraged in faith are opportunities to meet Jesus anew? And so there's several different threads there. One of which is that I've made suggestions to many different spiritual writers to write about some aspect of pain,
Mhm.
um, because it's so universal and so impactful, in
Yep.
different ways to different people. Um, and then of course, just the actual process of going through what you described
Yeah,
yourself, what you described in the book. Um, do you see those concepts as related?
absolutely. I think, you know, what I wanted to do, one of the things I really wanted to do um, was was normalize a sense of, pain and discouragement in the life of faith, right? So being a faithful person isn't this. Pollyanna kind of life, right? And it doesn't make the harms and the frailties and the ills of life just disappear, right? That's a facade. That's a lie. And so this book is written for people who have a faith, but deep within there is this sense of discouragement. There's this sense of almost guilt that they might have of holding questions and doubts that they don't know what to do with. Um, and and so what I wanted to do was essentially, what I found and what I wanted to communicate was that that's okay. Like that is not a faithless life. Actually engaging with those things and how we meet God in the midst of our pain, um, that is, I think that's meaningful for people. And as a Christian person, that's actually the heart of our faith. The heart of our faith is that God doesn't remove us from the difficulties of life and the ills of life and the dark valleys of life. The heart of our faith is that God comes and dwells with us in the midst of it.
Exactly.
But I think, yeah, but so often we turn things around because we think that, um, well, if I'm struggling, it means that God has abandoned me. And I wrestled with those questions, and it's hard not to wrestle with those questions when you're in the midst of that. But that's okay because wrestling is actually the faithful response. And in the midst of the wrestling, as I say, we can actually find the presence of God when faith is hard. And that will not make the stuff disappear. Alicia still had to go through chemotherapy. Um, but it reminds us that we have one who journeys with us.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I've heard from many authors that have written about, various types of pain is that it's cathartic for them.
It is. Yeah,
Find
absolutely.
it that to be true too?
Absolutely. Like there is this sense of, because we're connecting, right? You're releasing yourselves from the burden that you're holding. And what you do is you connect yourself with God who joins you in the midst of that. But if you are in an authentic community, whether that be family or friends or a church environment, what you end up doing is finding people who journey with you and who might be going through some of the same things, but also people who might have gone through it before you
Hmm.
and won't offer easy answers, but will just say, I know what you're going through and I'm here to help, right? And that helps us realize that we're not alone, that this isn't something that I am just going through by myself and everybody else is perfect in their faith and their spiritual life and I'm only the one. It
Such
reminds
thing.
us that no, we're this is a human experience and we can kind of go through this together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No such thing as perfect. For
No, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So I'd like to read from a couple of the endorsements for your book. This one's from
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
our great friend Kate Rademacher, who says,
Yeah.
this beautiful book offers meaningful encouragement on the spiritual path. For anyone who's struggled with feelings of disconnection, confusion, or disillusionment in their spiritual life, this book will be an invaluable resource. So being a resource, is that something that you wanted to accomplish with the book?
I did. Yeah. Um, As I said, like I've been ordained for 22 years. St. Paul's Cathedral is my fourth parish that I've worked in. And in every church that I've been in, even when I was a youth worker, every church that I've been in, I have met faithful people and some of them who have sat in the same spot in the church for 40 years, um, who carry on with them this profound dissatisfaction or discouragement. That's why I've kind of nailed on that term, discouragement, because they believe that they're doing it wrong,
Hmm.
that somehow their faith life doesn't match what they hear preached about in sermons,
Mm.
what they read about in maybe some popular Christian books or anything like that. And so, they hear about God answers prayer all the time. And they think, God, I don't feel God answering my prayer. They hear people talk about, feeling bathed in the warm love of God, and they say, I don't feel God's love all the time. I had somebody, and I write about it in the book, who asked me, I finished preaching. This was on a Sunday, and I was preaching on God's love and on the passage of the day. And this person came to me and said, Kyle, do you always feel God's love? Because I don't. Right. And so I've always met people, and these are faithful people, but they carry on this sense of guilt. Right.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
what I wanted to do was try to articulate that dynamic with that encouragement that says you're not doing it wrong. Um, we like to think that faith makes everything pure and problem-free, but that's not the case. That wasn't Israel's story. It wasn't the disciples' story. Heck, it wasn't even Jesus' story. So if that's not their story, why would we think that it's ours?
Yeah,
So I
really.
wanted to try to articulate that as best I could based on my experience and then based on Christ's journey to the cross, um, trying to hopefully get people to recognize that, or give them the tools to recognize um, that maybe this struggle and this wrestling is not contrary to our faith, but is actually part of our faith. And it's in the midst of that we find the God who comes close.
Well, just, your words remind me of, Jacob and wrestling in the dark, right? I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Well, and
exactly.
that's what, that was the name. He was given Israel because he wrestled. Wrestling is the position of faith, not this calm, stoic resolve where the problems of our life just, flow away and it doesn't matter. Like, that's not what faith is. That's escapism. But faith is wrestling. And Israel does it, the disciples do it, Jesus does it in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? And we need to be able to give ourselves the freedom to lean into our wrestlings, knowing that that's actually a part of faith.
So here's a comment from another reader. I've enjoyed your smooth flowing writing. So as you know, we have
Good.
many early stage writers in our audience.
Yep.
How did you refine your writing style, and what suggestions regarding craft do you have for other folks?
Yeah. So my writing career, as I said at the beginning, really began with writing for your life and the business for spirits, business of being a spiritual writer. And for me, that was really the beginning of me saying, I want to own my identity as a writer, right? And lean into that. One of the things that came out of that, and I think came out of that very first um, session that you ran, was I began working with a writing coach. And so I hooked up with Erin Healy.
Oh,
Um,
great. Yes.
yeah, and we worked together for probably about 3 years. She's
Wow.
amazing.
Yes.
Anybody who's watching this, if you want a writing coach, connect with her because she's amazing. Um, right from the start, she got my vision. She understood kind of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to write, and she helped me write. She helped me refine my style.
Mm,
She
mm,
helped me go through my stuff and say, well, I think you lost the plot here, or you're missing your message. She helped me figure out some of that grammar stuff that
mm,
I knew nothing about. Like, and so she helped me kind of work through that.
mm,
And that process, along with the process of regularly writing, writing for some podcasts, writing for some websites, writing for some presentations and things like that, just keeping it going, writing for my own blog, those two things kind of working together really helped me refine my voice
mm,
and refine who I wanted to be as a writer. And so for anybody, like for suggestions for craft, firstly, what I would say, you have to write. Like you have to just get into the habit of kind of churning some things out. And then if you can hook up with a writing community or a writing coach, um, who gets you and what you want to do and what you want to build, that intersection of two things for me was life-changing.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad to hear that Erin was so helpful. She's such a wonderful
Oh, she's
person,
amazing. Yeah.
and I know she's helped many different writers. So that's just so good to hear that you had such a wonderful experience with her.
Yeah, it was fabulous. It was wonderful. Yeah.
So your book also includes a study guide. How would you suggest that that be used?
Sure. I have to give a shout out to my wife, Alicia, because that was her insistence.
Ah, good.
I finished writing and she said, you really need to have a study guide. And I thought, I don't know. And she's like, no, you really need to have a study guide. Um, and it's really, so I think there's two ways that you can use the study guide. So the structure of the book is, it's my story of Alicia's, journeying with Alicia's cancer. But I also kind of build it upon the scaffold of what in the Anglican tradition is called the Triduum, like the Great 3 Days. Maundy, Thursday, which is the day of the Last Supper and the day of Gethsemane, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday, the day before Easter. And so I really structured on those 3 days. And so the idea of the study guide, this could be a Lenten journey that you could do yourself, where you just journal as you go through the book. Uh, each each study guide for the chapters is divided in three. So there's three chapter questions. There's three biblical questions based on a passage that I talk about in the chapter, and three reflective questions. So you could kind of base it on a journey through Lent where you have your journal, you read a chapter and you journal, or you can do it as a small group, right? And again, you just kind of work through those questions. It could be a Lenten small group or just a book study group or things like that. So I really tried to make the study guide as user-friendly as possible based on however somebody would like to do that, whether personally or with a small group.
Cool, cool. So I realize you've just recently launched this book, but
Mhm.
can you speak about any future plans, whether it's books or other things that you'll be up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So my vision is that this is going to be one of three.
Hmm.
And so Alive, Loved, and Free, Finding Jesus When Faith is Hard. The one that I'm working on now um, or beginning to compile now, is tentatively it's going to be um, called Empowered and Sent.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think the tagline is going to be something like walking with God when you don't know where you're going. And that's going to draw on Moses' story,
Huh.
right? And so kind of around that same themes, but around like how do we live the faith when I have no clue what I'm doing or I have no clue where I'm going, because kind of answers aren't always presented right before us. And so that's it's gonna be. And then the third one, I think I want to do something about rather than what does it happen in our own spiritual lives when we are discouraged, I want to write about what happens when a community gets discouraged,
Hmm. Hmm.
whether it be a Bible study community, a friend community, or a church community. When a
Hmm.
church community is kind of mired in discouragement and
Hmm.
doubt and question, how do they work themselves out of that? And where do they find God in the midst of that? And so I really see this as an arc of three. And so it's fun. It's great, working for the second one, but promoting the first one, like it's kind of a lot. And then, as I said, I'm doing a course on Henry Nouwen, and I don't know if there's something going to flow out of that about writing about Henry Nouwen and his influence on Christian spirituality, or I'm letting that just kind of permeate a little bit.
Mm. Well, I love the concepts of the two books that you described because they're very practical and action
Yeah,
oriented.
yeah,
It's kind of like
absolutely.
answering the question, what do we do about it? Not just,
Yeah,
observing or analyzing
yeah.
something. So I
And
love that.
and yeah, and that's one of the things that I got from, I guess, and from Henry Nouwen. Nouwen really worked hard to make his writing accessible. And so, and I love that, that review, that it was kind of an easy read because I really I didn't want this to be an academic text in terms of, I do talk about theology, but I didn't want it to be so high above that, laden with big terms that, well, this doesn't seem to impact our life. I really wanted it to be for the person in the pew, who maybe has never read anything about theology, but wants to know how to find God in the midst of all of that I'm kind of trying to figure out. And so I want it to be practical. I want it to be an easy read. I want them to be user friendly. And so yeah, so I'm excited about this journey that I'm on.
Wonderful. Well, it's exciting to hear about it. And I'm very glad for you, Kyle.
Yeah,
Keep us
thank you.
posted
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
your progress. Again, the title of the new book is Alive, Loved, and Free: Finding Jesus When Faith is Hard. And you can check out Kyle and all of his work at revkylenorman.ca. So again, Kyle, many congratulations and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brian. This was amazing.